Welcome to Wandering Jews, a J-Square Adventures. Travel far enough and you meet yourself.
We're your hosts. I'm Scott.
And I'm Sorelle.
In our first episode, we'll be talking about how travel can play a profound role in building Jewish identity and connection to the Jewish story, past, present, and future. We talk about identity. We're also going to be talking about we-identity.
We'll also be sharing something for the road that you can take home with you in your own travels.
It's a kind of a tip. It's kind of a recommendation. It's an aid to help you get the most out of your travels, whether it's here to Israel or to another international destination.
There's this amazing quote by Jewish philosopher Martin Buber. All journeys have a secret destination, which is sometimes hidden from the traveler. I could tell you that when I was traveling to Israel for the first time at 10 years old, I had no idea what to expect. All I knew was that when I got off the plane and I walked from the airport and I inhaled the sweetness of the air and I saw the palm trees, I felt like I was home. It was unbelievable. Having a shoko besakit and a pita became this sublime experience. And when I returned back to Manchester at 10 years old, what did I do? I took out my prayer book and Googled on the inside at age 10, Ani rotza lagor b'Yisrael. I want to live in Israel. And I didn't have the vocabulary, I certainly didn't have the words at 10 years old to articulate what it was about this trip, what it was about sitting on the Egged bus, this pull of seeing soldiers in green, of being surrounded by palm trees, of loving everything around me. But 10 years later, I was one of 17 people from Manchester, from England, one of 17 people to make Aliyah to Israel that year. And, you know, nothing about my journey to Israel made any sense. It didn't make any sense. I didn't know anybody in Israel. I didn't have friends or family. I love languages, wanted to study French, but usually you don't go to Israel to develop your love of French. Nothing made sense on paper. And when I think about the first traveling Jew, as in Abram, and he was commanded by God. He was living in Ur Kasdim, and he was commanded by God to leave everything that was familiar to him, to leave the place of his family and travel to Canaan, which also made no sense. He had to make this leap, go out of his comfort zone, and this push and pull, this feeling of tension, of pushing yourself because you know, even if it doesn't make sense on paper, that you are fulfilling your destiny, you are fulfilling your potential. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. And that's what comes to me when I think about how I went to Israel, 10 years old, had no idea what to expect. 10 years later, I'm on the plane, I'm embarking on my life, also no idea. And that's what comes to mind when I think about Martin Buber and destinations, because I certainly wasn't aware that that was where that first trip was taking me.
And a lot of that is really about that question of, in the middle of an experience, we can never really know where it's going to lead us. And I think that that's part of the fun and part of the meaning of travel, of discovery, of exploration. I mean, you know what? Let's not, exaggerate also, because obviously most of us, when we travel, we have an itinerary, we have our passports in our bag, we double check before we go to the airport. But still, there's a bit of a drop of Abraham and Sarah, I think, in all of us when we set out. You're leaving that place of comfort, you're leaving your home, you're locking the door, you're going down the stairs, you get in the cab, and it's an adventure. And I think that that's part of the fun and part of the potential meaning of traveling wherever you are, especially when you're coming to Israel, because there's so much pregnant meaning of arriving here, even if you're not kissing the ground when you get to Ben Gurion, but of that sense of, I'm coming to do something which is different. And I see it on the faces of people now during this particular difficult period, and people are arriving as parts of solidarity missions, but also on regular travel when people are coming and things are fairly quiet, and to be able to stand at some of these sites and to meet Israelis and to get a little bit behind the scenes, I think for a lot of people it's just a really exciting, wow, never thought I was going to be here, didn't know I was going to get this out of it. But I'm glad I'm here. And I think that's really part of this idea of what can make travel meaningful. I mean, I think for me, both as a traveler and as a tour guide or a tour educator, it's part of the power also of the connection between the power of landscape and the power of memory. So Ziggy Marley, right, Bob Marley's son, one of his sons has a quote. He says, "Our history begins before we are born. We represent the hereditary influences of our people, and our ancestors virtually live in us. I was born by myself, but carry the spirit and blood of my father, mother, and my ancestors, so I'm really never alone." And I always felt very strongly of that in terms of the Jewish story. And I remember as a kid in Boston, we used to build a sukkah in our backyard. And we were literally the only family for miles in our area who were building a sukkah in the rain and sometimes even in the snow. And it always struck me as very strange because sukkah, there's nothing to it. It's this hut that literally the wind is going to push over at any second. And here you are in the rain and in the snow, and you're doing kiddush for the sukkah holiday. You're doing the blessing over the wine for the holiday. But wait a second, this isn't where it's supposed to be. And I think that was a very important moment for me in terms of the drive to be in Israel and to travel to Israel. And I remember being struck, even as a first-time traveler to Israel when I came after high school, with this power of landscape and power of memory. You know, kind of the sense of I was walking in someone else's footsteps, that I was standing on the shoulders of ancestors who came before me, sort of like the Ziggy Marley quote, sort of like the piece in the Passover Seder of, in every generation, you know, one should see themselves as if the history is theirs, you know, as if they walked those steps. So I was thinking of like what would be a site that we visit with our groups and that I guide and I get excited about. And I thought about Tel Azekah, which is like if you leave Jerusalem and you're driving down about 35 minutes, you're on the road, the mountains are getting smaller, it begins to open up as you pass the gateway to the valley, and you're heading down towards Beit Shemesh and a little bit beyond. And all of a sudden the road opens up, and there's this enormous stretch this time of year in the winter, beautiful green, and on one side, this gigantic hill, and the valley all across. And this site of Tel Azekah is the place that we relate to, at least in the Bible, as a site where David fought Goliath. And like the story in the Bible is amazing, because the story, it talks about, unfortunately, war, and we live in a country where we have too much experience around war. And in this particular war, the tribes of Israel were meeting the Philistines there in that valley. And you can almost picture, it's almost like a bowl of hills with the valley in between. Where were the Philistines? Where were the Israelites? Where were these armies meeting? And the story says that at a certain point, Philistines sent down a gigantic soldier with very impressive armor, a huge spear, a helmet, the whole 9 yards, Goliath. And he calls out to the Israelites on the other side of the valley, "Send me a man." And the Israelites, to put it bluntly, they're caught with their trousers down. People are afraid. People do not want to go down and meet this giant. And it happens that the story continues, and it says that a small boy comes down from the hills, and you can see the hills from where you're standing, from the top of the Tel. And he came down, and he was carrying 10 loaves of cheese, bread, maybe some olives, maybe some hummus. Why? His brothers who were older were soldiers in Saul's army, in the armies of Israel. And when he got there to meet them, he asked his brothers, "What's the deal? What are you guys doing? How come you just standing around?" They told him the whole story. He said, "I'm going to go, and I'm going to meet Goliath." He was this little kid. We don't know how old he was from the text. He was maybe 15, 16, maybe younger even. They said to him, "Why don't you take weapons?" And Saul, the king, gave him a shield, armor, his sword. It was so heavy, the boy couldn't walk. The boy was David. And as he's walking down the hill, he leaves the armor scattered in the field. Goliath, who called out, "Send me a man," was pissed. They sent him a boy. And David says very calmly, "The God of Israel sent me. I'm going to take care of it." And nothing but a bag of stones and a little slingshot and his shepherd's staff, he goes down to meet the giant. And the story, of course, ends with David conquering Goliath. The boy beats the giant. Besides the action and the story and the scene that you can see with the landscape, and of course the memory of David, the king who becomes king of Israel, conquers Jerusalem, is the figure in Jewish history and memory who is seen as the forebearer of the Messiah. It's a story that's so much about us. And that's why I love these stories, because it's not only memory in terms of it happened a long time ago to someone else. No, it's happening to us. And we all have giants in our lives, challenges that we meet, that we look at them and we say, there's no way I can do this. There's no way I can do this. But hopefully with the example of David, each one of us can find a little bit of self-confidence, a little bit of faith, a little bit of, hey, I'm ready to go down to the valley because I know I can do it. And I think that's something that I want to share with my travelers. You know, the sense that these stories, these texts, these memories, again, they're not just about in ancient times and faraway places. They're about us today, and they have a powerful relevance to who we can be if each one of us thinks about, in terms of this case, who are our giants? How do I meet my giants? When have been times that I've overcome? And when have been times that maybe I've been overcome? And how can I be a little bit like David in my battles as I go through my life?
That is so powerful, so apropos what you're saying. I saw a quote on Friday. If there is a Goliath in front of you, that means there's a David inside of you. Okay. And I felt like when you were describing the site, I was like, okay, we all have the Goliath in our lives. Each of us has that thing. It is not an experience that's just for some people. Everybody has their Goliath and everybody can channel and has to remember. And that's the hard part, I think. The hard part is remembering that we each do have a David inside of us. And like you said, it could feel so insurmountable. I don't know how much I've shared with you, Scott, but over the last few years, I have had a huge Goliath in the form of health issues that have really forced me to channel my inner David. And really not just channel my inner David, but to challenge the script that I always told myself. Because not only did I not see myself necessarily as a David, I saw myself as somebody who what I defined as superhuman was somebody who could carry everybody else's stress. You know, like we try to do it all. We wear multiple hats, right? So I was wearing the hat of a mother. I was wearing the hat of a sister, a daughter, a spouse, all these different hats. And the one hat that I had consistently neglected to wear was the hat of self-care. So in my mid-40s, I was forced to confront. I kind of hit rock bottom to reach that realization. But through that moment of darkness and that feeling of insurmountability, I was able to go on a health journey that ultimately led to me losing 155 pounds, okay, in a year and a half. But in the process, actually finding myself. Because when you take care of yourself, it's not making you weaker. It's not like you're, thinking about what does the strong look like, right? So it's not making you weaker. If you are strong for yourself, does that make you selfish? Are you giving less of yourself to other people? Well, my personal experience would say no. Because actually, when you are stronger yourself, you are showing up. You are presenting as a person who has more to give, more energy, more vitality, more authenticity. And that is because in my Goliath, in practical terms, what did that look like? Well, I had a torn meniscus, so I couldn't move. Okay, so what do? I can't move. My doctors are telling me that even surgery is too complicated. So what does that mean? Okay, well, I'm going to then have to overcome my fear, my lifelong fear of swimming, because that's a low impact exercise. So age 43, jumped into the pool for the first time, overcame my fear, right? Now I love swimming. I go 5 times a week. But that was my Goliath. And I was like, there is no way I'm not going to conquer it, because the only choice I have is the next one in front of me. Make the next best choice. And each time, right, make the next best choice, whether that be nutrition, whether that be movement, whether that be going into the pool. We each have our Goliath. And it's very powerful to be able to connect the larger story of the Jewish people and say, we all have that inside us. And as you were talking, I felt I was at the site with you. We all have our Goliaths.
That's amazing. I think it's a beautiful story because it is so personal and you're putting it out there on the table. And that's an act of bravery in and of itself because not everyone wants to do that always. I know I don't always want to do that about myself. But that sense of like owning your David and meeting your Goliaths, that's exactly the kind of reaction, the kind of response, the kind of conversation I hope anyway that I can, and I hope other tour educators can engender, can cultivate with a group. Because again, when we talk about the travel, we're hoping people are coming not just as conventional tourists. Oh, I took a picture. Oh, I'm in a foreign country. No, there's some element that you're coming home. And coming home means I see myself as part of a we, part of a tribe, part of a community. Like in the Ziggy Marley quote, like in the verse from the Passover Seder. And if I can see myself and hook into those stories, because, they're relevant, they're strong. They offer me something, another resource to ask myself, how do I want to live? What do I want to do with my life? A life that's worth living.
A life where you are no longer just doing, but you're being. A life where you are living your values and it's part of your identity.
Definitely. And maybe even our kind of travel where, again, I don't want to go crazy, but where, again, it's very comfortable. People, again, they're taking their passports, they're getting on the plane. It's highly civilized that there should be a little bit of drop of Abraham and Sarah, of David and Goliath, of our we that pushes people out of their comfort zone to something which is more of a courage zone.
Love it.
Love it. Nice one. As part of our episodes, we want to share each time tips and recommendations, what we're going to call something for the road until we think of a better name. But the idea that, hey, it's not only about hopefully this few minutes, but hopefully it's something that you can use to take care, to take with, to take back as part of your travels. So I was thinking about what to bring, what to recommend. And, I was going through the bookshelf, looking, what are the things? And I said, dude, go to the simplest thing. What's your favorite? And bring that. So that's what I decided to do. I'm bringing a book I'm recommending of poetry by Yehuda Amichai called Poems of Jerusalem. It's a bilingual edition of many of his poems of Jerusalem. And why did I bring it? Well, listen, we can all go to the guidebook, the blue book, Fodor's, Eyewitness, and those things are awesome. And I always have in my backpack at least one of those when I'm traveling. But if you want to not just be a tourist, but you want to be a traveler, you want to go on a pilgrimage, my suggestion is wherever you're going, get into the literature of the place you're traveling to or the music, because that's the things that are the soul of a place. And so if you're going to London, hey, grab Charles Dickens. And if you're going to Boston, grab Thoreau. And if you're going out to San Francisco, grab John Steinbeck. Whoever it is, wherever it is. And Jerusalem, modern day prophets, David wrote the book of Psalms. Yehuda Amichai, maybe, is a relationship to King David because he's written the contemporary book of Psalms. And again, my recommendation, Poems of Jerusalem by Yehuda Amichai. The proof is in the pudding. And so I have to, going back to this idea of memory and travel and place, I'm going to read two short, very short excerpts from this book. And hopefully it'll be of enough of a hook that you'll say to yourself, you know what? Got to go pick up this book. Poems of Jerusalem, Yehuda Amichai. I've come back to this city where names are given to distances as if to human beings. And the numbers are not of bus routes, but 70 after 1917, 500 BC, 48. These are the lines you really travel on. Ela hakavim shebehem nosim be'emet. That's how it started, and I don't know how it will end. But still, from beyond the valley, from pain and from distance, we shall forever go on calling out to each other, we'll change, we'll change, we'll change. So check it out, Poems of Jerusalem, Yehuda Amichai, and each time we'll try to bring a tip, could be a little restaurant, a secret site. It could be a book, could be a piece of music. It could be a tip about what to pack or what to bring home. So that every time you go out to travel, you're taking home something, bring something with you that will help turn your experience into an experience of meaning.
That was beautiful. And to wrap up, we're going to leave you with the traditional traveler's prayer for safety. You know, I recently read the itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela, a medieval wandering Jew from Spain who recorded his travels. And when I read about, obviously, the hazards and the dangers medieval travelers had to face, it was incredible that people traveled at all. So we don't, thankfully, face the same hazards. It's a far less risky venture today to set out on our travels. But I'd like to share the prayer for travel in the hope that all of us will overcome the travails of the road and reach our intended destinations not only safer, but hopefully wiser. So I'm going to start out by reading the first line in Hebrew, and then I'll switch over to the English translation. And of course, this text for the prayer for a safe journey, you can find the full text in Hebrew. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu, shetolichenu l'shalom v'tatzidenu l'shalom v'tadrichenu l'shalom. May it be your will, Lord our God and the God of our ancestors, that you lead us toward peace, guide our footsteps towards peace, and make us reach our desired destination for life, gladness, and peace. May you rescue us from the hands of every foe, ambush along the way, and from all manner of punishments that assemble to come to earth. May you send blessing in our handiwork, and grant us grace, kindness, and mercy in your eyes, and in the eyes of all who see us. May you hear the sound of our humble request, because you are God, who hears prayer requests. Blessed are you, Lord, who hears prayer.
Amen.